Welcome to Not in a Huff with Jackson Huff, where we interview newsmakers, storytellers, and all-around interesting people. Sit back, relax, unless you're driving, and enjoy the show. Here's Jackson.
Hello. I am Jackson Huff. This is Not in a Huff. Thanks so much for joining me. As always, really appreciate it. This is episode 100. I have said that beginning, hello. Thanks for joining me. Really appreciate it. 100 times now. That is insane to me. This is going to be a little bit of a different episode. I'm going to talk a little bit more about myself this episode. Don't worry, we will still have an interview. You already see it in the title, a very impactful interview. I'm going to get to that in a second, but I just want to talk a little bit about 100 episodes. That's a ton of episodes. I just can't believe that we've gotten to 100. I'll mention it again kind of when we're talking about the contest. The 2-year mark, that's roughly episode 104. It won't exactly be correct because, when I first started, I was doing bi-weekly. So really, I think it's already been 2 years, but we'll do the 104 as an official 2-year mark. But, man, 100 episodes. I kind of talked about it in the first episode, but I started this just wanting to talk to interesting people from all walks of life, people that had their 15 minutes of fame, and then you think, where are they at now? People who have done amazing things that we can only dream of, people who have become famous, and people that we respect and revere. That was something that I really wanted to do. I remember over 2 years ago now, sitting in a park, had my dog there, had my fiance there, which at the time was just my girlfriend. So we've gotten engaged and actually getting married next month. It is August 2022 right now, so we're getting married in September of 2022. A lot has happened. I want to clue you just in a little bit of me, like I just mentioned. But back to that park. I was talking to her about I want to start a podcast. I want to talk to people. Their interesting stories. I love that. Obviously she was very supportive. I went and got a podcast microphone. That one wound up not being what I wanted at all. I tested an interview with my dad, actually. Can you hear me? Is this good? Can you understand what I'm saying? Can I understand what you're saying? How do I record this? What software should I use? Did all that. Interviewed my first person, which, sometimes who I interview is kind of flipped around because I post them in different times. But my first podcast is actually the first person I interviewed, Matt Javit, who is a local here in Indianapolis that traveled the world with his wife. I don't know where they are in the travels now. They may be a little bit more, staying in one space now. But he had an Amazon Prime show as well where he gets his hair cut all over the world. So appreciate him being my first person to talk to. I was nervous. I was scared. That was such a crazy thing. Now, honestly, I love talking to people. I enjoy it, and I can just focus on what I enjoy. I don't even really get nervous about it anymore. I just want to make sure I got questions written. Sometimes I'm writing questions an hour before my interview. It's been a wild ride. So much outside of the podcast happened, but I've spent so much time, almost 2 years with some of you guys, and I've never really talked too much about me. I'm trying to think, because I put out on Instagram, I'm kind of all over the place here, but I put on Instagram, what questions do you have for me? And kind of the overwhelming response was just to introduce myself a little bit more, just basic questions about me, several different basic questions. I'm going to kind of touch on some of those. But I think it's kind of funny when I was thinking of these basic questions. Okay, have I ever talked about this before? And most of the basic things about me, if you've listened to all 100 episodes, you've probably got some, because in my questions, in my explanations to people, when I talk in interviews, I talk about quite a bit of different things, but I've never truly introduced myself very much, and I've never truly giving you kind of who is Jackson Huff, who is your host. So I'm going to do that kind of, when I'm always thinking about, saying a little bit more about myself, a little bit more color, a little more character to the podcast. I don't, because, I try to make these interviews about 45 minutes, but they always seem to go over. So I'm always trying to cut little things out. And I'm thinking, okay, I can spend a little bit more time in the beginning and the end talking about myself and talking about me, or I can leave this question in the interview and people can learn more about this person that I have on. So 9 times out of 10, 98 times out of 100, rather than give myself time, I just keep more of the interview in, and I rush to have the beginning and the end so you guys get to listen to all these interesting people. I think you enjoy that, but I also think you may want to know maybe a little bit about your host. One thing I want to mention before I get back to talking about me, as you hear, it's hard for me to even do it. I've been talking for 3 or 4 minutes about talking about myself, but I still haven't said much. But like I was mentioning, 100 episodes, you probably got, a good idea of who I am and things about me. But I want to say, if any of you guys have listened to all 100 episodes, every single episode, please email me, notinthehuffpodcast@gmail.com. I will have a special prize for you. That's not part of the contest. God love you if you have been able to put up with me for 100 episodes. And I want to do something special for you. It's going to kind of be I guess, there's no way for me to truly check. Maybe I'll think of something, have you kind of do a little bit of proof, but probably not a ton. I believe you. My followers, my listeners, you're trustworthy people, aren't you? But yeah, email me, and I want to reward you for having to listen to me for 100 episodes, and hope you've enjoyed the vast variety of people. When I started this podcast, everyone say you need to find one thing. You need to find a niche that, sports or travel or this or that, which I 100% think if you do find that niche, that you gain a larger following that just like that type of podcast. And I could have 100% done that and probably been even more successful than it has been. But I didn't, because I love to talk to everyone, and I hope that you guys have enjoyed that, and I hope you've listened to an episode or two that you're like, I don't think I would be interested in that, and then you listen and you're captivated by it. Because that has 100% happened to me, that I've booked someone for an interview and thought, not sure about that, or I don't know about that. I don't know if I'll like that, and then I'm just enamored by them. I'm captivated by what they're saying, and it turns out to be some of the best podcasts and the best listened to, which doesn't even matter to me. Some of my favorite don't even have near the listens that others do. So it would be I guess the biggest form of respect, the biggest form of compliment to me, if you've listened to an episode that you didn't think you were going to like. It wasn't a topic that you thought would interest you, but it wound up being something you really liked. That would be so awesome, because that's my goal, is to bring you just an interesting person every week, even if it's not in a topic you thought you were interested in. Let's get back to a little bit about me. Rather than answer these questions one by one, let me just kind of tell you who I am, who your host has been for the past 2 years, Jackson Huff. That's me. It's always weird, but 31 years old, as most of you know, work in education, work for a college in admissions and recruiting, and teach a few classes, advise students. Really, really love that. It's kind of what formed my not really my passion, because when we talk about the interview here in a minute, you're going to see that started earlier. But it made me more comfortable in talking to people and getting people's life story out of them, and sharing, about all these people from all walks of life. I think that's kind of what helped me a lot in this process. And I've mentioned that in many interviews in the past, that it's a helpful thing for sure. Like I mentioned, sitting in that park and thinking about the podcast the whole time I've had my fiance Abigail by my side. We weren't officially engaged at that point when this first started, but we did get engaged last, not March 2022, March 2021, I think, but we're getting married September of 2022. Super happy about that, super excited. She works in the healthcare field. Oh goodness, let me think of the other things people wanted to know. Where am I from? I've talked about that. From Indianapolis, Indiana, biggest city in Indiana, Midwestern person, lived in Indiana my whole life, lived further north in the past, moved to Indianapolis in college, never left, love it here. Every state, every city has its challenges, but that Midwestern charm, the Hoosier hospitality is real. I really do think people in Indiana are some of the nicest that you can find. Sometimes people want to know a little bit more about my thoughts on things, my political views. I think sometimes if you listen, you can maybe get a little bit of that out of this podcast, but I really, really take Not in a Huff to mean something. I really do think that it's important to not just spew my thoughts. We live in a world right now where so many people are just throwing at you everything they think and what you should think and your thoughts are wrong. I don't want to do that. Not in a Huff is all about not being mad, not being in a huff, not being upset. It's my name. I was lucky enough to think of that name and with Not in a Huff. But it really has been what this podcast has been. Very rarely give my opinions, which, I think in the last 20 plus episodes, I've gotten a little bit more comfortable with doing that, but I still don't expect that in the next 100 just to be like, turning into an opinion podcast, because that's not me. This is a little bit more journalistic, if you will. It's crazy to think that it's journalistic, but if you think of all the people that I've talked to, it almost is that at this point, which is really, really cool. So I'm not really going to go into all of that. If you knew me in my personal life, you definitely know that I'm pretty vocal there, but not in the podcast. Let's get into. Hopefully, that's enough about me. Maybe not. If you do have other questions, I'm always an open book. I love to talk to the listeners. Email me, Instagram me, all that kind of stuff. But let's get into what this week's podcast is about. This week's podcast, as you see in the title, is with Gisela Lundy. And Gisela moved here when she was in her early 20s, married a U.S. soldier, and moved here from Germany. She grew up in Nazi Germany. She grew up, during the war, jumping in bomb shelters, jumping in foxholes, meeting young Russian girls, young Jewish people, and then them not being there the next day. We talk all about that. She was a kid, so she doesn't remember everything. But we talk about what it was like to grow up in a very interesting place, and obviously a place that was doing some very heinous things, and what the German people knew at that time. What makes this so special and why it's the 100th episode? You see that in the title too, that Gisela Lundy is my grandmother. And so it's really important to bring you somebody who I know personally, I love, cherish, respect, of course. It was a powerful thing to have you bring somebody to you who I've heard their story many times, and I just cherish cherish hearing it, and I'm going to tell you in a minute maybe why that's maybe even more important now. But just every week we meet somebody new. It's very few times have I had, a pre-interview. Sometimes people want that, but most of the time, we talk for 4 or 5 minutes before we start recording, a few minutes after, but otherwise that is my interaction with that person. So we meet them together essentially. This week, not necessarily the case. The other really cool reason I wanted to post this interview, it's a shorter one. It's only 20 minutes, so allowed me to chat to you beforehand. But it also kind of proves that this podcast was, I don't want to say my destiny, but I was destined to interview people, destined to talk to people. Obviously, I took that into my work as well, but destined to do something like this because I actually recorded this interview over 10 years ago. This was when I was just freshly out of high school. I spoke to my grandma and had her share her story with me. I wanted it to get recorded. I put it on my little HD camera. What was it called? Not GoPro. Oh, goodness. I can't even remember. It was by Cisco. What is it? I can't even remember what the camera was called. But so it's a video too, but obviously we'll just hear the audio here. I do want to point out, it's 10 years ago. Didn't think it was ever going to be a podcast. So there is background noise, which drives me insane at this point. 100 episodes in, the sound quality is super important to me, but it's also important to me to share this. So do bear with me with the sound of this. She has so many interesting insights to share, but the sound quality is not great. I'm sorry. Let me jump in that time machine 10 years ago and tell young Jackson, fix your sound quality, dude. But I can't do that, so you'll just have to bear with it and hear what she's got to say. But I'm so glad that I did interview her 10 years ago, and I'm so glad I do have this just for, having it for my own personal records and my family's to cherish because my grandmother is still alive, but she does have some memory issues now, some pretty significant ones. So I do, I do think that I'm not exactly sure whether this would be an interview that could happen now. Obviously, when it comes to memory, old memories are easier than new ones. So it's easier to remember the past than the future or the present. Obviously, you can't remember the future. That would be something else. But the present. So maybe she could still reminisce. But I do think that this is a powerful conversation for me to have a record of history of. So glad that I was able to speak with her. I've never spoken to you this long beforehand. I'm going to get into my interview with Gisela Lundy, her time growing up in Nazi Germany. Afterwards, then let's talk about the 100 episode giveaway, how I'm going to give some prizes with that. There will be a nice prize, but let's listen to my interview 10 years ago with Gisela Lundy, and then I will catch you afterwards.
No. My name is Gisela Lundy. I was born Gisela Meng to Franz and Elizabeth Meng in Worms, Germany in 1941. I can start remembering by the time I was 3 years old. We lived with my grandparents. They had an apartment house in Worms. And we lived on the first floor and had the rest of it rented out. My dad was away in the war in Norway on heavy artillery. And I looked out the window a lot and I seen those two little girls playing out in the street, and I tried talking to them, but they couldn't understand me. So my mom and my grandma found out there was two little Russian girls. Their mother was deported into Germany to do work for the Nazis, and the little girls was by themselves all day long. And they didn't have, it was starting to get cold out, it was late in the fall, and they didn't have heavy clothes to wear. So my grandma and my mom, after dark, snuck them into the house in the evenings, where nobody can see them, because we weren't allowed to do that. And my mom was a seamstress. They took some old clothes of theirs, like they did for me too, and tore them apart and sewed each of the girls a winter coat. And we played, but every time we could sneak them in the house, I played with them. One of them was 9 years old, her name was Lydia, and the other one was 7 years old, her name was Natalia. And shortly after that, there was a lot of heavy bombing in my hometown. And my grandparents had a piece of ground with a 2-room garden shack, little ways out of town. So we moved a lot of our belongings out there, beds and kitchen equipment and some of their valuables they had, and we stayed out there. And I remember being around 11 o'clock, the bomb sirens go off, and I was ripped out of bed, and my mom threw a blanket over me, and we ran to bomb shelters, which I didn't mind because I was used to it. I was born into it. I thought it was kind of nice not to have to stay in bed all night, because I didn't know no different. And when on the very end of the war, I was 4 at the time, the sirens went off, and we didn't know it at the time, but I was aiming for Worms, my hometown. They was trying to damage the Rhine River Bridge. That was one of the last bridges that they had damaged to keep the Germans to come back across. And we ran when the sirens went off, like we always did, and we couldn't. The bomb shelters was all full. So we went back in the woods, and there was some holes German soldiers had dug. What do you call them?
Trenches.
Trenches, yeah. And we jumped into my grandpa and my grandma and my mom and me, and we jumped in them. There was foxholes. We jumped into foxholes. And my grandma couldn't keep up with the running, so we lost her. We didn't know what happened to her. And we jumped in the foxholes, my mom, my grandpa, and me, and our dog. He ran with us. And I remember they sat down, and stretched their legs out, and they laid me on my stomach across their legs and put a blanket over me. And I don't remember a lot of details like my grandparents and my mom did, but there was a lot of explosions, and the whole ground was shaking, and it lasted about 10 minutes or 15. And when it was all over, we climbed out of the foxhole, and we didn't know if my grandma was still alive. We walked back down the street, and she came running towards us. She found a place behind a big cement wall. That's where she lay. And she said the whole wall was shaking. She was afraid it'll fall on her before it was all over. And I remember walking down towards the place we stayed, and everything was on fire around us. And when we got back to the house, the 2-room garden shack we lived in, there was a big hill we had to climb over, because the house right next to us had been bombed. And it left a big crater in our yard, and left all that dirt, in our walkway to go down to the place, but our little 2-room garden shack was still standing. So they put me in one of them wooden wagons, and all the neighbors got together and dug out our neighbors next door. They were still in their basement. Their house had fallen on them. They dug them out of the basement. I don't remember all the details, but I remember being there. So after all that was over and everything kind of settled down, the people that lived behind us, Gertrude, she was 4 years older than me. She used to come over and we played together. I was about almost 5 and she was 9. And we go down that big old crater that was left in our yard, filled up with water. And we went down there trying to catch frogs. So one day I was out by myself, she hadn't come over yet, and luckily my grandfather was outside working in the garden. They put out potatoes and whatever they could find, to grow some food for us to eat. And I went down there trying to catch frogs and I fell in it. I had a winter coat on, it was in March. And if it hadn't been for my grandpa, because I started screaming for my mom, he heard me and I would have drowned it. He went in the water waist deep and pulled me out. And after, I remember them getting me in the house, taking all my clothes off and sticking me in a warm tub of water. And after that happened, all the neighbors got gas and filled up that water hole. And after that, we just lived, the best way we could until my dad came home. My dad wound up in French prison camp for a year and a half. And somehow my mom used to go there on the train to bring him food because they didn't feed him a whole lot. And they made out a plan for him to escape, which he got accomplished. My mom went with civilian clothes and waited on him. And some of the other German prisoners helped him to do it. And he escaped, and it took him 2 weeks, which normally would have been like a 3-4 hour train ride. It took him 2 weeks to get back to Worms because he had no papers, so they had to hide and jump on the trains and hide so nobody would see him. And when he finally came back home, they went into town because the big house my grandparents had been totally bombed out. So they pulled their wagon into town and got all the stones and material they could find, whatever they picked up. My dad built a house out where I then grew up the rest, until I was grown up outside the town. My dad built that house. It was a double house. My grandparents lived on one side. My parents and me and my sister, was born in 47, lived on the other side. And then later on I had another sister. She's almost 20 years younger than me. And I came to the United States in 1962 and got 3 children and 6. I wanted to come back to the 2 little Russian girls and their mother. After it was all over, they came out to see us and said their goodbyes. They said they was going to go back to Russia, so they thought probably, because we never ever heard nothing from them anymore after that. We kind of figured they was probably killed on the way, wherever they took them, because we never ever heard from them anymore after the war.
Okay. So tell me about, you've told me about this before in passing, but tell me about when you played on the bombs and in the shelter and stuff like that.
Yeah, and we used to play, there were some bombs that haven't detonated. We used to play, they looked like big old Chinese round slides. We used to slide down on them until Gertrude, my friend I played with, her older brother, caught us, and he chased us off, and they called the bomb squad, so they came and got rid of the bombs.
But that was just normal to you to play on
Yeah,
the
it was
bomb.
just normal for us to play those. Anytime we seen something shiny, you can slide down, we did it. We used to play in the old leftover bomb shelters before they tore them all out, played house in it and hide and seek, slid off of the cement, that was kind of sloped outside.
So during, how about before the war, what did people think of Adolf Hitler?
Well,
Like when he was elected, how did that all how would people think?
the reason he was elected, because Germany was in a really bad economic down slope, nobody had jobs, and he acted, which at the time he was for the people. He gave people jobs, better housings, and everybody was going for that, because everybody was doing without for years. It can happen in any country. Somebody comes along and makes everything, for the working people. look rosy. They said he was the guy, to vote for. That's how he came in power. They didn't know he was gonna did what he did later on. They never even dreamed he was gonna do that. He was supposed to be the people's person.
So what was the government's excuse for why were you guys in war with America and everyone else that you were? What did they tell you?
Well, Hitler started the war. He wanted to he started in Poland. He wanted to take over all of Europe. Fast, I was told throughout history.
Right.
What he actually wanted to do, he wanted to create a united Europe, and there would have been a united Europe and the United States.
Were the Germans perceptive to that, or by that time he just was doing whatever he wanted?
By that time, the Germans figured out, it was a bad choice, and he shouldn't have been the guy that elected, when they did, because everybody was afraid of him by then. You couldn't say nothing against him, or you'd have wound up in a concentration camp like the Jewish people did. It didn't matter if you didn't go along with his regime, you was the bad guy, you was arrested.
Mm-hmm. And what did Germans think after? They didn't know at the time that exactly the extent of what he was doing with the Jewish people and the gypsies and stuff, did they?
No, not really. They heard rumors, from what I was told later on. I was too little, to know. Know what was going on at the time, but later on, when they was talking about it, they heard rumors. Some of them didn't even believe them, they said nothing like that could happen. But it did, later on they found out it actually did. Did you know very many Jewish people that maybe disappeared during that time, or was that not? I didn't, but my grandparents did.
And so your grandparents knew some Jewish people that had been taken to the concentration camp, so?
Yeah, that, just disappeared, nobody knew where they went. The people actually was told they were sent back, wherever, to leave Germany. And some of them did, the ones that had enough money did go to Sweden or Switzerland, wherever, they got away, but most of them didn't.
What about before the war when they were just kind of pressing down on the Jews? Do you remember that was right when you were born, like the whole, making them wear the Star of David and stuff like that? Do you remember any of that?
No.
It's like, before the war, they were just making them wear the Star of David and paying more taxes.
Oh yeah, they made them wear the Star of David and closed up their shops, burned their shops, knocked their windows out. That's what they call the Kristallnacht. Mm-hmm. And Hitler was under the impression, he told the people, the Jewish people came to Germany and took everything away. They run whole Germany. It wasn't the Germans that run it, was the Jewish people. They took over the big banks, big businesses, everything. And from the way, the German people was told, Hitler was going to get it back for them.
So what did the Germans think once they heard, what had happened, what had actually Hitler had done with all these people?
Well, most of them was totally, in shock, appalled, they couldn't believe it. Yeah. Like my family, they could not believe it. Something like that could even happen, but it did.
Yeah. And what did Germans think of Americans at that time?
They really didn't think bad of Americans. Matter of fact, they was kind of fascinated, by the American people. When the American soldiers came into Germany, everybody seemed to get along. They had no hate against the Americans, because the Americans didn't start the war, it was the Germans. Hitler did. Mm-hmm. Nobody wanted war. Like today, nobody wants war, but you have to go, if your country starts war, you have to go.
There was a draft and everything, I'm assuming.
Yeah, everybody, all the guys had to go.
I don't really know, with your town, did the Americans occupy your town before actually real war started? Did you come in contact with any Americans before then, like soldiers, or did it not happen until they were bombing?
It was the first my hometown was occupied by French. And then later on, the Americans, the French moved I don't know where the Americans came. They stayed for a long time, like I said. I met my husband in 62, now he was stationed over there. They stayed in Germany for, I think, up until the 80s or 90s. After the Berlin Wall came down, a lot of the bases over there closed, and there's not that many Americans in Germany anymore, as far as I know.
Yeah. How did the French soldiers treat the German citizens at the time?
They didn't treat them as nice as the Americans did.
No.
As a matter of fact, when my dad escaped, it went on for about a year. The French Gestapo came 3 times looking for him. He always ran in the back through the neighbor's yard and went back in the woods and hid all day. Then they didn't catch him, but they came looking for him for 3 times, and then they finally gave up.
I never knew that part of all of that. So, tell me like how you met your husband. How did that come about? How did you meet an American soldier like that?
Well, I was in town at a Milano cafe. That's where I met him. Because the American soldiers was every place, especially on the weekends downtown, and cafes and discos and different places. That's where I met him.
So, what did you think? Did you want to go back to the U.S.? Or was that something you dreamed about, or what?
No,
how did that happen?
Not really. I never thought about coming to the United States. Never even entered my mind.
Was it scary to leave your family like that?
Not really. I was too young and dumb to realize.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it now, but when you're only 19, you're ready to see the world. You don't care how.
That's true. So was America what you thought it was going to be once you got here?
Not really.
Not really? Why? Explain why is that?
It was just too... there was a lot more to do in Germany, for young people. When I came over here, I stayed with his grandparents in a housing addition. There was no place to go. I was used to going downtown, going to the cafes, meeting my friends, going to the festivals. They have festivals all summer long in different little outskirts of town. And my hometown has the Oktoberfest in Munich once a year for a week. And there was just nothing to do but sit in the house.
Yeah.
Out in the yard.
And how did you go about, did you learn English while you were still in Germany, or how did you learn English?
I learned it over here.
You just learned it when you came?
Mm-hmm. I knew a few words, but...
Yeah. I guess that's it. That's good. I think we got it. So that was Gisela Lundy. That was my grandmother. What an amazing person. What a special person who's been through so much in her life. Obviously, we just covered the... time that she was a kid and her early move to the United States. But since the 1960s, obviously she's raised 3 kids, one of them being my mother. Been through a ton that we don't even have time to get into. But it was just an honor to know her. I was going to say an honor to speak with her. I'm so used to that, but I'm honored to have known her and to have somebody in my life that has a real history to them. Everyone does, but and we've learned that obviously through 100 episodes. But I challenge you, if nothing else, to do this. Maybe with a little better sound quality. I apologize again for that. Again, 10 year ago, me, what were you doing with the sound? But I challenge you to hear your family's story. I think you'll be shocked and surprised to hear just the life that your grandparents have lived, your great-grandparents have lived, your parents have lived, your brother and sisters have lived, aunts and uncles. You get the picture. So much life, so much experience, so many interesting things. If you record it, I don't think that whether you're going to create a podcast 10 years later or not, I don't think you'll regret having that. I certainly won't. If I never record another podcast, which don't worry, or don't worry. Sorry for you. There will be quite a few more. But I'm so glad that this gave me the opportunity to show you my grandma, show you that experience. And if I don't record another one ever, to have this was really powerful. So happy for that. I'm rambling a little bit about that. So take her interview from what it was, which is a powerful conversation, and let's shift gears back to the 100th episode, which, I just want to thank you guys. Like I said in the beginning, if you've been here for all 100 episodes, please email me. Special gift to you for that. And I will, I'm honored that you've listened to all of them. Even if you didn't start 2 years ago listening, if you've binge listened, which is another feat in itself to listen to me that much in a binge session, but if you've binge listened, that counts too. I'm so glad that you've listened to them all. So yeah, shoot me that email. But the prize, the contest, I'm going to give a listener who subscribes to me on Instagram, who leaves a 5-star review on Apple and hopefully on Spotify, leaves a written review on Apple if they have an Apple device. I'm going to pick one who does that. I'll need proof of that, screenshots of the review, screenshots of the 5 stars, screenshots of following me, which I'm going to talk about if you don't have those things in a second. But email those, direct message those, get them to me in some way, and I'm going to pick one, randomize it, probably put names down, and have Abigail draw from a hat or something, and the winner's going to get $100. I don't know whether it'll be a gift card or what it'll be. There's a lot of listeners outside of the United States, so we'll do what we need to convert that over to pesos or to not lira. That's goodness, to euro, krona, wherever it is. So happy to have you, and I don't want to not open the contest to you as well. But yeah, one listener, $100. Depending on their response, there may be some second and third prize winners too. But whether it's, like I said, whether it's gift card, cash, something, $100 value, and we can talk about that with whoever wins, what makes the most sense to them. In today's world, if it's $100 gas card and that's going to get you to get some good gas in your tank, we'll do that. But I cannot thank you guys enough. I thank you every episode for listening, and man, if I could almost get emotional about it. I'm so thankful for those who listen, whether you listen to every episode or whether you just listen to the episode of your best friend who's being interviewed or your favorite star that's being interviewed. Just the sheer volume of people I've interviewed, and if you would have told me 2 years ago that you're going to interview, Olympic medalist, you're going to interview a two-time gold medalist, a silver medalist, a U.S. Olympic bobsledder, I would have thought, nah. You would have told me you're going to interview Bob Eubanks, the legendary host of the Newlywed Game. I would have said, that sounds like a crazy experience, which it was. Go check that interview out. If you told me you're going to interview the person who caught the Green River Killer, I would have never believed it. If you would have said you're going to interview Lori Beth Denberg from Nickelodeon's All That, nostalgic, reliving my childhood, watching all that, seeing her as a loud librarian, and then I got to interview her. Amazing. Interviewed Lavender from Matilda. Interviewed people that I had never once heard of before this, but then they just became such amazing friends to this day that I still, correspond with. Never in a million years I would have thought, I was about to say 10 years ago, 2 years ago, not quite 10 years yet, 2 years ago, that I would have had these experiences, and I'm so thankful for that. And I really do this just to learn about people and to gain knowledge myself and hopefully help those who are listening gain a little knowledge too. I never do it for the listeners, which that sounds weird. I never do it for the listener count. Some episodes have thousands upon thousands of listens, and some, don't. And that's perfectly fine for me. I am so happy to been able to speak with those people that maybe didn't bring in a huge listener base, but you know what they brought? They brought in a lot of knowledge, a lot of wisdom, a lot of insight, and it was an honor to speak with them. To the people who have been featured and have been guests, have been nice enough to come on, so thankful for you. I hope very, very much that my listeners have made it beneficial for you to come on. I do like to think that I'm a friendly enough guy that it's just an enjoyable conversation, but I know you guys have products and books and things that you're hoping to gain a larger base. So hopefully some of these followers have bought the books or bought the products. I'm never going to be a hard seller and tell the listener, hey, you got to. But you as a listener, I hope that you've gained enough insight from one or two or more people that you have picked up that book or you have bought that product. I know some of you have. I've spoken to some of you guys that have. So really, really thankful for that. Both from you loyal listeners and to those who have been featured. So it's just, I think at this point in the conversation, all I can say is thank you, and that's all that it will be. Is just, I don't even think I can put into words how appreciative I am for those who have stuck around, those who have listened to any part of any 100 of these episodes. It's just a magical thing to think that me sitting here in this spare bedroom, which I moved about a year ago, so now I'm in the spare bedroom doing this. It's also my dog's room, so when it's not my podcast room, it's actually called Rigby's room, which is my Irish Terrier mix, 11-year-old dog's room. To think that me sitting here looking out the window at the nice courtyard in front of me, that thousands and thousands and thousands of people have listened to my voice across the world, listened to my conversations with people, is just a special thing. It really is, and obviously wouldn't be here, wouldn't be doing it without you. I said I don't care about listener count, but I do, obviously. I don't know that I'd be able to book the people that I do if it was just me and them talking and it was just a friendly conversation between the two of us. Obviously, we got to have people listening and supporting and following. So happy that you're there. So I always tell you, hey, go follow on Instagram. Go follow on Spotify and on Apple. Leave that review. But it's extra important this time because there's a contest. So again, I'm going to pick somebody that has proven that they've followed. They have written a review if they have an Apple phone. They follow on Instagram. Send me those screenshots by email. Again, notinahuffpodcast@gmail.com or in a DM on Instagram. Whatever way you want to get it to me, carrier pigeon. Show me that you've supported the podcast. It doesn't have to be a new review. If you sent it in months ago or years ago, that's okay too. Show me the review that you've left. Follow them on everything you can. If you don't have Instagram, hope you do. I'm not gonna remove you from the contest. Show me that you've supported this podcast now or in the past, and you can be entered into the drawing. Obviously, you do have to give a 5-star because you got to be listening on Apple, on Spotify, maybe on something else. We can talk about that if you email me, if you listen on something else. But to show your support, show that you've supported me, prove it to me, send it to me in some way. You'll be entered in that drawing. $100 in some form, whether it's a gift card, some way, I'll get it to you. And I again, thank you so much. when will the contest end? I think a good time would be that 2-year mark. The 104th episode. So this 100 episode, 104 is supposed to necessarily or technically be the 2-year mark. So I guess we'll end it in 4 weeks. So plenty of time to listen. I know sometimes, I look at the listeners and there's a big jump or a big bump and boost, obviously, when the episode comes out. We've got those listeners. And then we have some listeners that you trickle in, about a week later, there's a big bump too. So if you're listening the day it comes out, go become part of the contest. If you're listening a week later and another one's already came out too, well, good. You can still be part of this contest. But those who are listening 3 years from now, let's just put a date down. So obviously this is August. It'll be 3rd when it comes out, 2022, and it'll end sometime in September of 2022. So sorry for you listening in 2024. Contest has ended. But if you're listening before 104 has came out, well, please enter. Would love to obviously have that engagement, but I'd love to send you something as well. So, man, I have rambled so much more this episode than any others. I think combined, I've probably already talked more than 50 of my episodes. So thank you for sticking around this episode. Thanks for sticking around for 100 episodes. So honored to have you listening. So honored to have you here. We'll see you next week in 101. Take it away, Chris.
This has been Not in a Huff with Jackson Huff. Thank you for listening. Be sure to join us next time, where we will interview another amazing guest who is sure to make you laugh or make you think. Or, hey, maybe even both. But until then, keep being awesome.